Another thing that's being done here in the state of Florida, and I think this is great. You remember back in 2018 when the voters approved that constitutional amendment restoring voting rights to felons?
That was a big deal last night on 60 Minutes. I don't know if you caught that.
No, I didn't catch it.
But yeah, it was a big deal trying to talk the whole story about, hey, we need to vote.
Who, we? The felons?
The felons. It was
felons?
a story. The felons, yeah. The story was around felons that had brought in the amendment, had helped write it and put it out there. And now it's, changed back again?
Well, one of the big supporters of that amendment was the League of Women Voters. You're just kind of getting the images. How many women were after Jeffrey Dahmer?
Right.
Come on. All right. So they, everybody loves, I guess, a comeback story. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. But okay. So, all right. So we gave felons back the right to vote once they'd completed their sentences, right? And now their sentences also include the fines, the investigative costs, and the restitution. That's a part of their sentence. It's not just the jail sentence. It's not just jail time. It's also the fines, restitution, and investigatory court costs that they have to pay back. That's part of their sentence. And there was a big brouhaha about how, and there was lawsuits about how you can't make them pay that back. That's unfair. That's like a poll tax. It's not a poll tax. It's just saying, hey, you want to say you pay your debt to society? There's more to it than just the prison time. And I said, well, these people don't have the money. I mean, we're typically not talking about a huge amount of money.
No, we're not. And I was very surprised to hear the amount.
Yeah, it's like, sometimes like $1,500.
That's exactly what it was.
$2,000. And you're telling me that you can't, if it's important to you and you want to pay your debt to society, because remember, crimes are committed against the state. You do have a victim in a crime, but who brings the charges? It's the state of Florida versus whoever the alleged criminal is, state of Florida, because the crime is committed against the social order of the state. And so the state, which is us, by the way, who pays for the state? We, the taxpayers. That's our money. The state is us in a collective organization. So when we're asking them to just pay back some, and believe me, this doesn't cover the costs of their prosecution by any stretch. It's not like they're including the salary for the state attorney or anything like that. These are just hard costs and court costs, investigative costs where they've had to pay an investigator to go out and do something with respect to it, and then, importantly, the restitution to the victim. And you're talking, in most cases, less than a couple $1,000. Now, there'll be some cases where it's higher, where the restitution was more significant. But in most cases, I don't want to say it's affordable, but if it's important to you, maybe you don't spend as much money on other extracurricular activities that are important to you, and instead you save that money and you pay off your debt to society, and you actually pay it off. And I know this is something Schreiner talks about a lot. This is a very important issue to him. Well, who's now stepped into this argument? Well, of course, Mike Bloomberg and all of his backers, the Democrat backers, and they've stepped in and they've started paying off these fines and restitution.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
Yep. Mike Bloomberg has raised $16 million to help felons pay outstanding fines and fees in order to gain their voting rights just in time for this upcoming election. He's raised $5 million from the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, in addition to the $11 million he's raised from other sources, and they've already paid off the fines and restitution for 32,000 felons just before Election Day. And you just have to wonder, is there some quid pro quo there? In other words, hey, we'll pay off your fines and fees and stuff, but you better vote Democrat.
Do you know what the number of fines that cannot be paid by those felons, roughly? This is a guesstimate number, but it's very close. It was 700,000 plus. There's a 1.2 million felons that, if the law, the way they wrote it originally, didn't have to pay off the penalties, be 1.1 million voters that would come back into Florida. Mm-hmm. But the ones that can't handle it right now are 700,000 plus.
So we're looking at maybe 400,000 to 500,000 who might be able to handle it if it's important to them to pay that off.
Right.
And, of course, that issue went up to the 11th Circuit. Judge Barbara Lagoa, who was up for the Supreme Court seat, wrote on this particular issue one of the concurring opinions. So she joined in the other opinions and wrote her own concurring opinion on a separate basis. And it's the same arguments we've just been talking about. Of course you should have to pay these off. They're part of the sentence. You want to say you paid your debt to society? Well, just pay it. It's not the end of the world. It's not that big of a deal. And look, I know felons have it tough. I get that. It's tough to get a job. It's tough to rejoin society. I get all of that. But you know what? No, they're not victims. They're not victims of their circumstances, and that's what the liberals want to say, that they're somehow actually the victims. No, they made choices. They were free individuals. They made choices that did not respect or took away other people's lives and property, or to some degree. And you might say, well, murder was excluded. Okay, fine. But you can still really affect somebody's life. You could take away a piece of their life by, accosting them, violently robbing them. Maybe they can't sleep as well at night. Maybe they have flashbacks of this, sexual assault, and other things that were not exempted because they've tried to say, oh, violent felons are excluded. No, that's not true at all. A lot of violent felons were not excluded. In fact, only the most violent felons were excluded from having their rights restored in the state of Florida. But here's what I want to get to on this story, and that is that Governor Ron DeSantis and House Representative Matt Gaetz from the Panhandle have asked our Attorney General, Ashley Moody, who, by the way, is doing a fantastic job. I love Ashley Moody. They've asked her to look into the allegations that Mike Bloomberg and the group Florida Rights Restoration Coalition have violated the law by offering incentives for voting. So in other words, if you'll go and vote Democrat, we'll pay off your fines and fees.
That's like buying votes?
Well, there you go. Is that like buying votes? And so Attorney General Moody has said, and I'm reading a quote from her now, I have instructed the statewide prosecutor to work with law enforcement in any statewide grand jury that the governor may call, she said in a written statement. So she's moved on this request by Governor DeSantis and Matt Gaetz, a representative for part of the state of Florida residing up in the Panhandle, who's kind of famous. You probably know of Matt Gaetz if you're watching the politics and stuff. And they're going to look into whether or not Mike Bloomberg is buying votes by paying off these felons fines and fees. And it certainly appears that that's what's going on. I mean, let me just ask you a question. Do you think that Mike Bloomberg is going to pay off your fines and fees if you stroll into his office and you say, man, I can't wait to vote for President Trump. I'm voting Trump all the way. Do you think you're going to get your fines and fees paid off? I don't think so. I bet you're not. I bet you they'll say, well, yeah, okay, sir. There's an application.
Checks in the mail.
Yeah, there's an application process. We're going to need you to fill out this application. We'll definitely consider very seriously your application. And like you say, Pat, checks in the mail. Oh, why didn't it get to you? Oh, President Trump, he sabotaged the Postal Service. The guy you wanted to vote for sabotaged the Postal Service. And, well, I guess you just won't be allowed to vote then. And that's what would happen. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard. And if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.